I'm going to give you 3 very simple instructions. Instruction number 1, identify your dominant hand. Instruction number 2, with your dominant hand, snap your fingers 5 times very quickly. Awesome. Instruction number 3, with the forefinger of your dominant hand, the pointer finger of your dominant hand, on your forehead, draw for me a capital E. Excellent. This is an experimental technique that social psychologists have used since the early 1980s to measure what's called perspective taking, the ability to get out of your own head and see things from someone else's point of view. Snap your fingers 5 times quickly. What's that instruction about? Nothing. It's just a distraction. Finally, you get to the part that the researchers really are looking for, which is this. There are 2 different ways to draw the E, all right? I can draw it like this, so you can see it, your perspective, or I can draw it like this, so I can see it, my perspective. Put people into an experimental setting, control for handedness, make them snap their fingers, ask them to draw an E. What do? Do they take their own perspective? Or do they take someone else's perspective? If you drew the E from your own perspective, it doesn't mean you're a bad person. Because what really matters here is context. In general, the more powerful people feel, the more their perspective-taking abilities degrade. All of you are about to become more powerful. Some of you will begin drawing the E differently than you drew it today. If you gradually lose the ability to see the world through another's eyes, all the experience and expertise you've accumulated will melt into a puddle of unrealized potential. But if you work to balance power and perspective taking, you'll become a more effective leader because you'll offer reasons beyond "I said so" for why anybody should follow you. You will avoid what could be the biggest mistake that bosses, teachers, executives, government officials, and anyone else in a position of power can make. And the mistake is this: thinking you're the smartest person in the room. If you think you're the smartest person in the room, you've just proved that you're not. Believing that you're the smartest person in the room, trust me on this, never ends well. Remember the lesson of the E. Argue like you're right, but listen like you're wrong. Use your power, but sharpen your perspective taking.
What is this marshmallow test? Well, when you look at children and you look at all the different theories about what makes successful kids, you realize that almost all the theories are wrong because they haven't been verified. Like, for example, high IQ. You have a lot of high IQ people who become marginal members of society. And so what is the one psychological test that correlates with success in life? And I found out that it's the marshmallow test. You get kids and ask them, do you want a marshmallow now? Or 2 marshmallows a few hours from now? And the kids that want the marshmallow now tend to be those that want shortcuts, those that don't want to do the hard work. They want the quick kill. They grab that marshmallow. But the other ones say, no, wait a minute. If I wait 2 hours, I can get 2 marshmallows. I can hold out. There's a pot of gold waiting for me. They're not going to take the shortcut. And so you say to yourself, well, that's a test for kids. But then you track them decade by decade by decade, and you find that they are more successful, they have a lower divorce rate, higher income, higher status in society, that don't want that simple payoff now, but are gonna delay gratification into the future. And so I realized that that's the key to success in life, not just science, but in life. Don't take the shortcuts.
But can it be taught?
Well, part of it is your personality that is formed when you're very young. Okay, let's be very clear about that. But I think that, yes, I think that, for example, it turns out that if you do the same thing with poor children and the same thing with middle-class children, it turns out that poor children will, in general, go for the quick kill because they know that things disappear real fast. If there's money in the house, it's gone in the future. If you can show people that there is a pot of gold out there, that yes, you hold out, you go to college, you'll learn the discipline, there's a pot of gold out there. You can learn to appreciate that fact. What we have in the brain that is different from animals is we understand time. We understand the future. My grandparents came to California 100 years ago. But imagine, back then, life expectancy was 49 years of age. I mean, you were born, you had kids, and died. Life was a bitch. Now we have an increased lifespan. We have all the luxury goods. Instead of yelling out the window, which is what my grandparents did to communicate, we have the internet. And so when you look at it the long term, decade for decade, you realize the enormous progress that we've made. We constantly daydream, we scheme, we plot. We constantly think about what could be. Now let's do an experiment. Go home tonight and teach your dog the concept of tomorrow. Try it. Teach your dog the concept of tomorrow, the next week, the next year, and you realize you can't. Animals live in the present, and that's what I think intelligence is. Intelligence is being able to map the future, simulate the future. So if you get an experiment, people with low IQ and high IQ, put them in the same room, and you give them the same job, rob a bank. You'll find out that the low IQ people probably do a much better job of robbing a bank, plotting the bank robbery, than high IQ people who get all messed up with legal implications and stuff like that. The point is that you can have some very smart robbers because they see the future. And that's what we humans do that animals cannot. We constantly daydream. We constantly create worlds that don't exist. And to me, that's what intelligence is. Some people ask me, well, what is the meaning of life then? And I say to myself that if somebody gives you from up high the meaning of life, it's too easy. I mean, is that all? My attitude is that it's self-discovery. We have to reinvent ourselves, that we have to recreate ourselves, that the meaning of life is rediscovery.
Gives you better sex, increases your good cholesterol, gives you more friends, gives you more meaning, engagement, life satisfaction, and happiness. If you have a purpose-driven life, it adds years to your life. You live longer. Let me share two stories with you. Story number one, we're interviewing one of those school teachers. She says, the first year I taught was heaven. The second year I taught was hell. I had 5 boys that second year, and they were incorrigible. And there was one kid in particular. He was impossible. One day, this kid's in the doorway of the classroom, and he's kicking and moving his arms and making noises, and I lost it. She said, I'm ashamed to say these words. But I walked towards that kid with the intention of kicking him. Thank heavens he got up and ran away. I kept walking. I went to the principal's office. I said, this is it. It's him or me. And the principal took the kid out. She said, I felt terrible. So I went to 2 of my colleagues and poured my heart out. And they said to me, you are not the key to every door. And as she said those words, she burst into tears in the interview. And we waited a long time. And then she looked up and said, I hated that. Those words, you can't be the key to every door. She said, so I decided to become the key to every door. Instead of pushing disruptive kids away, I began to seek them out. I began to bring them into my world. I read every book I could find. I kept notes. I ran experiments. I kept notes on the experiments. And then she kind of pulled herself up and said, today, I am the key to every door. When there's a disruptive, troubled kid in the school, they say, give her to Miss So-and-so. She seems to know what to do with them. That's a profoundly important story. It's a story of transformative learning. When I have a higher purpose, I find the energy and the courage to go outside my comfort zone. Now, the second story is a lot closer to home. I once had a daughter. She was single. She was living in Washington, D.C. She had reached that point in life where she said, there's not a good man left on the earth. And then she found one, and she got really excited. Relationship grew. And then one day our phone rang. She's talking to her mother, and I know what's going on. This guy just dumped her. This daughter is the firstborn child. Many firstborn children share a common characteristic. If they're miserable, they want you to be miserable too. Okay? And she said, I'm coming home this weekend. I thought, oh, no. Her mother hangs up and says, you're the father, you go to the airport and pick her up. So the next day I go pick her up. She gets in the car and she doesn't say, hello, how are you? She says, that no good, dirty, da-da-da-da-da. 5 minutes later, she takes a breath. And I said, are you problem solving or purpose finding? We're finally pulling in the driveway. She takes another breath. I say it again. She says, what are you talking about? And she said, this is the real world. I said, well, I think it applies to the real world. By then we're in the house. I pull out a sheet of paper out of my file, and it says, Robert Quinn, life statement. She looks at it, and then she grows kind of quiet. And she looks up and says, when you feel bad, you read this? I said, no. When I feel bad, I rewrite it. It's been rewritten hundreds of times. She said, yeah, I can hardly understand some of this stuff. I said, yeah, it's written to a customized audience, one person. Then the first miracle happened. She said, do you think I could write one of these? I said, I'm sure you can. She went in the bedroom. For a day and a half, she worked on her life statement. The miracle was, I did not have to suffer during that day. Right? She got on the plane. She flew home to D.C. A couple days passed. I get an email. She said, he called me. Oh, this will be interesting. And she says, so I wrote him this letter. And I'm reading this letter that she's attached. It's incredibly vulnerable, open, honest. And then at the bottom it says, and my roommate said I can't give this to him. Now that's an interesting thing. Why can't we give this letter to this guy? You don't tell some guy that dumped you that, here's how you feel. And then she said, what my roommates don't understand is that what he thinks doesn't matter. Whoa, wait a minute. A few days ago, what he thought caused her life to shatter. Now she's saying, what he thinks doesn't matter. She's saying, this is who I really am. Didn't know this a while ago. Now I know it. It doesn't matter what other people think. You see, when you clarify your purpose, you take back your external locus of control where you worry about what other people think, and you take an internal locus. You don't become insensitive, you don't become rebellious, you become centered. You become powerful. Now here's the interesting thing. In the next few months, she began to be promoted. Her career turned. Why? This was a dating breakup. Why is her career taking off? Because when you find purpose and meaning in what you're doing in one area of your life, it grows in every area of life because you are one person. That company had a woman coming in with the same dresses on, body looked the same, but it wasn't the same employee. This was a woman now full of leadership for the first time. When someone has that meaning and that integrity, things start to change. The research says when you give up self-interested goals, where most of us are most of the time, and you take on contributive goals, you function differently. The biology changes, the thought process changes. Learning accelerates, you grow more. The only thing that I'm left to conclude is you and I are designed to be purpose-seeking mechanisms. You've been shaped by life. You've had bad experiences and good experiences. And both the bad experiences and the good experiences are there to teach you something about you. And if you look very carefully at those, you can determine what your purpose is. Every person in this room can clarify the purpose of their life, become the key to every door.
This is your first challenge. I'm going to give you 30 seconds. I want you to turn to someone sitting near you, next to you. Okay, look them in the eye, and this is what I want you to say. When I look at you, I see blank. Okay, 30 seconds, go. You're going to look at me and say, Mr. Floyd, when I look at you, I see blank.
Okay.
Okay?
When I look at you, I see a smart man.
Now I go. Alexis, when I look at you, I see me. Where am I looking? I'm looking in their eyes, deeper than that. Where am I looking? Their brain and their heart, we're getting closer. Yes? Where? Their soul, we're getting really close now. Where's your soul? Inside. That is your first challenge for today. Stop looking at people on the outside and say this out loud. Look on the inside. And here's where you use this. It's really hard to look at someone who doesn't look like you and see yourself in them. My children don't look like me. They look like their mom. They look Asian. They look Filipino. They have black hair and brown eyes and Asian skin. They're tan and they just don't look like me. My son Justin, he likes anime and Justin likes wrestling, WWE. What you need to know about Justin, though, is that he has autism. And he's awesome. He's kind. He's compassionate. He's caring. But he doesn't understand where he fits in socially. He can't look people in the eye. He doesn't know how to interject himself into a conversation. He doesn't know where he fits in. When Justin was in middle school, he used to come home from school every day. And I would ask him, hey buddy, where'd you eat lunch today? And he would say, Daddy, I ate alone. He still does some days now in high school. Justin looks like all of you guys. And he is just like all of you guys. Not here. Here. And there's a difference, guys, between being alone and being lonely. No one here is alone. We're all in the physical proximity of people. But there are people sitting in here who are lonely. Lonely is a feeling. Lonely is toxic. Lonely is dangerous. It leads you to do things that you normally wouldn't do. A lot of times unhealthy things. But about five years ago now, Justin learns how to skate, and 8 months goes by and he gets invited to play, he wants to play on a rec league team with typical kids, with regularly developing kids. And the last game of the season, we were losing. It was 8-3. It was about 3 minutes to go, and I'm in the bleachers. There was a face-off, and Kyle takes the puck, and he passes it to Justin, and Justin skates in, and he takes a soft shot, and it goes off the goalie's pad, and he gets the rebound, and he stuffs it in the goal. And the kids are going crazy. And needless to say, I'm crying. I'm like melting the ice with my tears. And so I went over to the opposing team's bench, and I reached out my hand to their coach, because I knew what he had done, and I said, thank you. And he looked right at me. He looked right at me, and he said, don't thank me, thank the boys. And they were 10 and 11 years old, and all they did was let a kid score a goal. But here's the takeaway. They had no idea how they would affect that kid's father that day. They had no idea that that kid's father would go out and tell that story to over 100,000 kids. And I don't think you're too young to hear that message. And so I say that to you. Your life is not about you. Your life is not about you. Your life is about all the people around you. Your life is about all the people you can touch, all the people you can impact, all the people you can influence, all the people you love, and all the people that love you. That's how you source your life. Live your life like that and watch your life change. It's amazing what happens.
Did you know that one of your hands is longer than the other one? It's true, watch this. Underneath your palm, you have a line that goes straight across your hand. Now please take those two lines, line them up perfectly so you make this fan shape. Now with that fan shape, please stretch your hands out, roll your hands together, and you'll see that one of your hands is just barely longer than the other one. Show me the shorter of your two hands. Hold it up real high so I can see it. We're gonna give this hand a goal. Look your hand square in the eye. say this at your hand. Hand? Say it like you mean it. Hand? I command you to grow bigger. Now watch this. Line those two lines up again. Stretch your hands out, roll them together, and look at how that hand grew. Ah! What you just did was give your hand a very simple goal. You said, I'm gonna make my hand grow. What's even cooler is if you do the exact same thing for yourself. You come up with your own list of 25, 50, 100 goals or summits for yourself, and you define success for you. So how do you discover what your Everest is, your big thing for you? It's real simple. Take a giant piece of paper, draw 3 huge circles on it. The first circle, you write down everything you're talented in. The second circle, you write down everything you're passionate about. In the final circle, you write down what education you already have or what education you would be willing to get. And whatever is overlapping in the center, that is your Everest. So you might ask, well, what's it like to actually climb Mount Everest? I'd like to take you there now. If you look at the Statue of Liberty, it's one of the most recognized buildings on the planet, 305 feet tall. Now, if I exit out of this presentation and shrink that image down as small as I can get it, and then I stack 95.2 of those Statue of Liberties on top of each other, that gives us 29,035 feet above sea level, which is the height of Mount Everest. And there are only 8 ways to die on Everest. Avalanche, unexpected fall, exposure, pulmonary edema, cerebral edema, dehydration, heart attack, and crevasse fall. If I could just not do those, I'll be fine, right? The climb was pretty intense. We keep climbing higher and higher. The climb gets steeper and steeper. Now, the air on Mount Everest is 1/3 of the oxygen that you and I are breathing here. So my pace was 1 step for 3 breaths. I thought, man, there's no way I'm gonna make it up to the summit. This is too slow. This is ridiculous. I'm taking these steps, and I get to a spot where I cannot take my leg out of the ice. I look down, they're not stuck on anything. What's going on? Why can't I move my foot? Nuru, he's a local to Nepal, comes over to me, and he takes his mitt off, and he knocks twice on my oxygen canister on my back. Normally, it would make a noise like thunk, thunk, showing that there was oxygen in it, that it was full. He goes, ping, ping, and he says, "Sir, very bad news. You have no air. Maybe we go back, maybe you die." And I said, "Not that one." He says, "Oh, more air up high." And what he was saying was that previously in the expedition, there had been oxygen bottles that were stashed up higher in case of emergency. He could go get one, and I would stay in place. So he disappears off into the Himalayan black sky. There's not a feeling of loneliness in the world like sitting in the middle of the Himalayan mountains with no one around you at night. I'm looking down at that red suit that I put on, and it starts to turn gray and then almost black. And I realized what's happening was my brain was shutting down. I was actively dying because of the lack of oxygen. Remembering my hero, Sir Edmund Hillary, who said, "It's not the mountain we conquer, but ourselves." Conquer yourself, John. Conquer yourself, John. Finally, I see this light coming down towards me. And I'm like, "Please be Nuru, please be Nuru." And he says, "John, sir, I have air." And I'm like, "Yes." And he takes this oxygen bottle off of the regulator, the old one. He takes the new one, screws it in. I take a breath. And as soon as I do, my suit turns from gray to red again. Whoa, my foot pops right out. We start walking. He says, "Ready to climb?" I say, "Yeah, ready to climb. Let's do this." Absolutely. So I start taking these steps, one after the other. 3 breaths, 1 step. Conquer yourself, John. Conquer yourself, John. So I see this pyramid shadow in the distance. That shadow is Mount Everest being cast dozens of miles into the distance. And that's when I realized that I was there. I was standing on top of the world, on top of Mount Everest. I'm here now, not to brag about myself or tell my own mountaineering stories. If you leave here and think all that guy did was tell his climbing stories, you've missed the point. This is about you, because every person should have his or her own Everest. See, in life, bad things happen. There are challenges, but do not have a case of excuse-itis where you have this disease that things are too hard, too difficult, or that you're not good enough for whatever reason. The mountains will never lower themselves to your level, but you must rise up to the demands presented to you by the climb. The problems of the world are not going to get easier. You must rise up, bring out that leader within, and rise up to the demands presented to you by the climb. The greatest leaders of all time have come from the times of greatest turmoil. The greater the problem, the greater the opportunity for leaders like you to step up. We are a generation that is disciplined. We are a generation that is productive. We are a generation that is fighting to fix the mess that was given to us. We are a generation that believes that this planet will not move forward unless we embrace kindness, compassion, and respect for all of life. It is a choice that you will make whether or not you will let that leader out. Will you?
About 40% of our happiness, on average, is dictated by our genes. About 15% is dictated by our life circumstances. About 50% of our happiness is really up to us. Over the last 15 years or so with National Geographic, I've developed a bit of an expertise at finding extraordinary populations in the world and then learning from them. But how do you do this for happiness? How do you measure happiness? You can look at somebody who's laughing today, but it might be masking depression. People could be fibbing about their happiness, or they may just be laughing and happy because they had a few cocktails. Happiness is really a meaningless term because you can't really measure happiness, but you can measure life satisfaction. You can ask people on a scale of 1 to 10. Well, I'm going to start with the coolest way to measure happiness. What we search for in Google predicts happiness even better than education and income. First of all, it turns out that people who Google about their dogs are happier than people who are Googling cats. Go figure. People who are looking to find action movies and comedies are happier than people who are looking for romances. And for those of you who prefer romance by yourself, people who Google softcore porn are happier than people who Google hardcore porn. Don't worry, it was anonymized data. But for this project, I took a more straightforward approach. I asked these huge databases to tell me where in the world life satisfaction's highest, daily emotions are highest, and purpose is highest. The happiest place is the island nation of Singapore. What you have here are 5 million people, very ethnically diverse, that live in near perfect harmony. Almost everybody in the entire country owns their own house. And in these high-rise housing communities, every building reflects the ethnic diversity of the entire country. So you have no ghettos for the Malay, or no ghettos for the Indian, or gated communities for the Chinese. The kids go to school together. The part of the world where people enjoy their life most from day to day is in Costa Rica. The Central Valley in the middle of the country, gorgeous place, flanked by 3 volcanoes, verdant green, best coffee in the world too. And everywhere in Latin America, there's some sort of a Latin American secret sauce. If you control for everything else, Latins are happier than every place else. And the needs are taken care of in Costa Rica. So these Latin values of family, of religion, and the notion that they'll never forego a great social experience to stay at the office and do a little extra work. The happiest people in the world are socializing face-to-face with people that mean something to them about 5 to 6 hours a day, and they get that here in Costa Rica. You go to the other side of the planet, northern Denmark, Aarhus specifically, we found the highest purpose. People find more purpose in their life than any place else. So this is a place where status is not really celebrated, but equality is. This is a place where people are taxed to the mean. So people don't take a job just for money. In America, according to Gallup, only 30% of Americans like their job. In Denmark, it's about 80% because they don't have to worry about paying for their insurance, and they kind of realize that status isn't celebrated. They're better off getting a job that addresses their passion and their flow. So you see things like furniture design and architecture. They work for 37 hours. They knock off at 3:30 p.m. and then they go enjoy their hobby, be it rabbit jumping or bicycling au naturel. Don't try this at home. So when it comes to individuals, the picture's a little bit different. So not all of us can move, but I'm gonna give you a few ideas on how you can shape your own environment, your own ecosystem to favor happiness. People who undergo a deep meditation experience are able to live in the present better than people who don't. It's a certain rewiring of the brain in a permanent way. Every new happy friend you add to your social network increases your own happiness by about 15%. Unhappiness and even loneliness are measurably contagious. So really curating those people who you're traveling through life with is one of the most dependable way to create your happiness. When it comes to work, the biggest driver of whether or not you're happy at work, it's nothing to do with your pay or your job or your boss. It's whether or not you have a best friend at work. So the takeaways are this. When it comes to happiness, think about a diversified portfolio of pleasure, pride, and purpose. And don't try to change your behavior. Don't run after happiness. Trying to run after happiness or change your behavior to be happier is a recipe for neurosis. It'll occasionally work in the short run. It'll almost never work in the long run. So I want to close with a blessing. This comes from a guy named Armando Fuentes. He's a columnist in Mexico. I asked him for his advice, and he thought for a minute, and he said, yes, here's what I recommend to you for happiness. He said, eat without gluttony, drink without getting drunk, love without jealousy, argue but don't go to bed mad, and occasionally, with great discretion, misbehave.